Hi, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the session on funding mechanics, the last session of summer seminar this year. We have three great speakers. We're starting with Sabrina David from FHWA. In May 2022, Ms. Sabrina David became the new division administrator for the Federal Highway Administration, Georgia Division Office. As the DA, she leads a diverse staff of 29 years of experience in the transportation field. Prior to Georgia, she was the Deputy Division Administrator in the FHWA Tennessee Division and the Director of Program Development in the FHWA Georgia Division, and the Planning Team Leader and Transportation Planner in the FHWA Florida Division. She also worked as a transportation planner for the Tallahassee-Leon County Metropolitan Planning Organization in Florida. She has a bachelor's degree in history and education and a master's degree in planning from Florida State University. She is a member of the American Planning Association and has her AICP certification. She is married and has 3 daughters.
Well, I'm so very happy to be here. This is my first conference, and you all have set the bar very high. And so this has been great and very welcoming. This is something I'd love to talk about is funding. And so I'm going to talk about it from the federal highway perspective, talk about bill, resources, talk about the money a little bit. And if there's other information you would like for the future, we're happy to come back and talk about it at other monthly meetings. But as far as funding mechanics, Fed Aid 101, but today is just going to be a good overview. Okay. We love our technology. We just
Sorry.
Oh, it's a different laptop.
My laptop this time.
That's the notification.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you just want to use the space.
Okay. Wanted to talk about bill. And so in November 15th, 2021, the president signed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And what's unique about this is it is really a once in lifetime generation investment. So every time we have an authorization, typically they're 5 years. You know, in some years they've been 2 years, like with MAP 21. But this is a 5-year authorization. And what's unique about this, it is the $550 billion in investment, not only in highways, but transit, bridge, and broadband, and clean water. And so let me go to the next one. And the focus is on economic development and creating jobs. And let me get to the highway provision. So I'm going to talk about kind of federal highways perspective. I'm going to give you some stats on some of the other agencies, but really from the highway side. And so for the 5 years, we're going to see $350 billion for the highway programs. And so while it comes from, when you hear the contract authority comes from the Highway Trust Fund, and then the advanced appropriations is from the general fund. So there is some money coming from that. But What's unique is so we have the core programs that they're called legacy, those got funded, but also there is new highway programs. And so there's about a dozen of those. And so they are coming over in what we call formula. So there's a by apportionment, and so there's that formula based, whether it's the resiliency fund, the resilience, carbon reduction. We have our bridge program, our EV, and then there's discretionary. And so those are, they come over in allocations, but that is kind of a competitive process. So those are discretionary. So the formula ones come to the state, and then there's the opportunity to apply for discretionary funds. And so you'll see a focus throughout bill on safety, bridges, climate change resiliency, and project delivery. And goes out to local agencies, but this time with programs, we actually have direct recipients, other than say RAISE or those kind of build, but these are broader programs where local governments can get the funds directly. Okay, so just want to mention on this slide for the federal highway funds, there is going to be $350 billion that is going over the 5 years. And as you see, the other agencies did get significant amount. FTA did get the 70 million plus the 20 some in advanced appropriation. So there's the rest of them. Okay, so I'd love to talk about funding. And so this is the formula funding that is coming to Georgia. And so in fiscal year 22, it's a 1.7 billion. And so those are the core programs plus the new ones, carbon reduction and protect. And then over the 5 years, Georgia DOT will see 8.9 million. And so that 8.9 billion, and that will come out through the state and out to 2 projects. And as you see, from 22 to 26, it does increase. So. Okay. On this slide, and this is not all inclusive, but this gives you a good snapshot of the types of entities that are eligible for these types of programs. And so you look in kind of the first column, those are the state DOT. So we had talked about the apportion programs. Those are some of the ones listed before, the NHPP, STPG, et cetera. Then we have the bridge formula program. And then the NEVI program came out. So not only the state, but local agencies can apply for that. The Safe Streets and Roads for All, you heard about that yesterday as well. And you see MPOs, locals, agencies and tribes can apply for that. And so as it goes on, there is a big mix of new recipients that can apply for these types of programs. And as you move further down, the reconnecting community, not only the state, locals, MPOs can apply. And then we move down to infra, that's also available. And then the local regional project assistance, that's like the build and new mega and those types of grants. But the point is, this is the first time that we have seen such a diverse range of recipients, which means figuring out new processes, because again, typically we work through the state DOT. And so this gives us new opportunities to work together on funding. Okay. So main takeaway, I want y'all, I brought up the bill website. And so this is going to be the one-stop shopping to get information. And so if you go, this is not, you'll get a copy of the presentation. So if you go to type in FHWA bill, it'll take you to the main site. And then across the top, you can get different information. So this is the main page. If you want to click on the link there, that'll take you to the bill IIJA site. A key thing is to subscribe for updates. You see that there? You go in, you put your email, you will get updates, and you can pick different, it's within DOT for getting information about bill and other programs. So that is a great resource. And then again, kind of going across the top, so talks about the overview, funding, assistance, local support, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The fact sheets. So when bill came out, all the different fact sheets for the different programs are available. There's also fact sheets for each state, and then the guidance. And that's going to be really important too, because through bill, we have all these new programs. So some of them are going to require notice of proposed rulemaking. Some we can do by guidance. If we can, we'll get them out that way, and we'll get that out to the state and y'all through that. So it just depends if it's a new program. So for example, we got out new NHPP guidance, about a month ago. That came out, through the state, and again, it's going to be on this website. So I just want to kind of show you this is a kind of one-stop shopping. Okay, so the next two slides are just going to kind of give a summary of the funding and kind of actions that came out. So for example, our apportionments to the state came out in December, and including the bridge formula funds. And then the states that are APD, Appalachian Development Highway Systems, Georgia does have funds, so information went out to the states. The funding went out to the states in January. And then kind of going on, the HSIP information came out, and the vulnerable road users, those funds came out. And then as well as, it was part of the apportionments, but that information came out. And then of course, NEVI. And so NEVI is a new program. That guidance was issued, and then we gave out information about the additional field corridors. And if you kind of go down, like transportation alternatives, new guidance came, that's available, and then carbon reduction. And so on that web page, they have links to all of these types of funding and guidance. Okay. So moving on, the Highway Infrastructure Program came out, and so that was in May. Safe Streets and Roads for All, y'all are familiar with that. The NOFO came out, and the fact sheet, and then in May, and I just want to mention that those applications are due in September 15th. And then Railway Highway Crossings Program came out, and so that really to emphasize that it's now 100% and talks about the eligibilities for that. That guidance came out in May. Two big guidance updates for STPG, and the NHPP program came out in June. And so new eligibility, so that's the thing about Bill. It brought new eligibilities and added to those, revised them as needed. And then the NEVI program, the NPRM came out for setting the standards, and then also had Q&A. So as states and others came out with questions about the NEVI program, that all got compilated into the Q&As. Then the Bridge Investment Program. So that NOFO and that fact sheet came out, as well as Reconnecting Communities. And so Reconnecting Communities, those applications are due in October. And that's also available, so in June. And so that kind of give you a snapshot of everything that has occurred since the last few months. And so it seems like every week, Federal Highway and OST is coming out with some new program, and we try to get that information out to the state. But if you subscribe and you also go to the website, you will be able to see and get that information directly as well. So I want to bring your attention to also on the page, upcoming notices, NOFOs. And so you may have an interest in them coming out. I know it's a little small, but you'll see it on your screen. So just like I mentioned, Reconnecting Communities came out in June, and then there's others that are coming out in the next several months. And so some say summer, some they're not determined. So they do have to go through processes before these funding notices come out. Okay. So the next few slides are going to give you some examples of resources that Bill has. So as part of the Building Better America program, as part of Bill, we had technical assistance guides and resources that came out. So this one came out in May, and so there's a link to that one. And given that Bill was so overarching, not just transportation, it does have it was organized on different types of infrastructure. So if you're looking just for transportation, you can go directly to that. And so, for example, it may take you, one of the resources, classes by the National Highway Institute, NHI, and so there might be that available, or resources to the local technical assistance program, the LTAP, and things like that. So that's available. So for rural entities, a similar guide was provided, and so that's also available on the website. And Then there's a guidebook, and that talks about the funding, kind of break it down by the types of infrastructure. That is also available as another resource. And then I'd like to spend a little bit of time, because this just came out. It's called the DOT Navigator. And so back to the site, and it's here, transportation.dot.navigator. And in the middle, or let me just kind of read through the bottom, it says apply for DOT grants. So there's a link to that. But the middle one says find technical assistance resources. And so and then the next one is learn about Bill. So when you go to technical resources, this is what comes up. And so whether you're a local government, if you are a local government or you're providing services for local government, this is available to them. The state DOT's resources, tribal governments, MPOs, transit agencies, and then other stakeholders, including nonprofits, because nonprofits now are eligible for some of those grants. And then it talks about DOT contacts. And so when you start to click on those, that will for assistance, including one of them is contacts to us. And so I'm going to take this time. Dan Hinton is here from Federal Highway. He is the Deputy Division Administrator. And so we oversee the office in the division with our staff. And so between Dan and I and the staff, we are available to answer questions about the programs. I know sometimes they'll have, if you have a question, send it to something at DOT, and we will answer. We are your local contacts, so if there's something we can do, we are happy to answer questions. I know collectively, OST or within Federal Highway, trying to collect all the questions, because if you're asking one question, probably others throughout, but we are your local contacts, the division office, working through the state DOT, local agencies, the MPOs, rural organizations. We are here for you. And so you'll have my contact information, and you can reach Dan as well. And we are available to answer questions about it, because we recognize a lot of information is coming out on Bill, and we want to kind of help you through that process. And so also on the side, it talks about grant application resources. So what's kind of new is that typically we'd be involved in the process kind of after like a local entity or the state applies, and now they got a grant, now what? And so we may work together on the grant agreement, working through the project development process, which we would normally do. But now there's also available resources on the front end for applicants, putting together an application that takes time and resources. And so those OST and Federal Highway has that available, and Navigator is a new resource there. So with that, I will leave it for questions. I know that was kind of a lot of information, but I just want to kind of leave you that we are here and available to help.
And we'll be doing questions at the end for all of our speakers. So our next speaker is Andrew Heath. Andrew Heath joined the Georgia Department of Transportation in 2008. He has held numerous positions within the department, including within the Office of Planning, Executive Assistant to the Chief Engineer, State Traffic Engineer, and most recently as Deputy Chief Engineer, overseeing the divisions of engineering, intermodal, and operations. He has a bachelor's and master's degree from Auburn University in civil engineering and is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for hanging out for the last session. Appreciate it. Thank you, Sabrina, for that overview. Sabrina kind of gave you the federal perspective on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. I'm going to take it down a level to how Georgia DOT is approaching this new legislation. David will come up and hopefully provide more of a local context for you. So that's how we plan this thing: federal, state, local. So you'll get this thing from all sides. So let's jump right in. So first thing, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is massive. It can feel absolutely overwhelming when you first start looking at it. Sabrina talked about the White House guidebook that was issued. That cheat sheet guidebook is 465 pages long. So that's the condensed version of this. And every single one of those sheets has a program on it. So there are hundreds of programs within the infrastructure law. But we at GDOT like to think of it as 4 buckets. Condense the entire law down into 4 buckets. One is existing formula programs that have been plussed up. So think of the safety program that Sam talked about yesterday. The apportionment received funding the safety program went from one level to a slightly higher level, and that was consistent across existing formula programs. The next are new formula programs. You've heard about EV charging, you've heard about Protect, you've heard about carbon reduction, brand new formula programs that all state DOTs receive from the federal government via allocation of formula. Then you've got the discretionary bucket. That's where you start getting into the hundreds of pages of unique discretionary programs. And that's where I think it gets very overwhelming because there's lots of information coming out on this opportunity here or this grant opportunity there. That's where local governments really need to be paying attention because there's a tremendous amount of opportunities for very specific project types that are coming out through the infrastructure law. And then there's the policy and programs behind it. You've heard discussion this week about equity, environment, climate, resilience, all of those things. There's those policy flavors, I'll say, that are interwoven across the entire infrastructure law, not just on the transportation side, but getting into the other programs as well. So what I'm going to focus on is on the Georgia side is the federal highway programs, and that's primarily what Sabrina talked about as well. But as you get into the infrastructure law, I mean, big winners were transit and rail and aviation, serious dollars going towards those programs. A lot of those coming to GDOT through our intermodal programs. You don't see them here, but don't forget about that. A lot of money going into broadband, not through federal highway, but through the Department of Commerce and being distributed that way for both middle mile and last mile build-outs. But I just want to kind of condense it here to talk about the highway programs that GDOT traditionally relies on to do our infrastructure projects, because more likely than not, if you guys are working on or are partnering with the department in any way, it is likely being funded through one of these formula programs. That's where the dollars are coming from. And these are the same programs that Sabrina had on her list, but you can kind of see the increase by program to GDOT. If you sum all that up, including the plus ups, which are on the top, and then the new programs on the bottom, that's about a $350 million-ish increase per year in federal aid funding. So we went from about $1.4 billion per year to Georgia to $1.7, $1.8 billion per year. 21% increase, something like that. I just want to say that because a lot of folks see that $1.2 trillion headline number and just think about, wow, you know, what we're going to get out of all this. But let's just condense it down to GDOT and the primary programs. It's 350-ish million per year. Now, to put that into context, when we've looked at bids lately with what's been going on with inflation and supply chain and things like that, our bids have been about 30% up from prior years. 20%, 30%, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind with all this. So what this presentation is going to really focus on are those the new programs, and you've heard a lot about that. Just kind of get into some detail about how we GDOT are approaching those. But Sabrina mentioned the fact sheets that are included on the Federal Highway website about all those programs on the top. And they've got a great one webpage site, literally just one site listing all of these programs. You can click on all those and read the details about those. And you need to, because eligibility has increased for a lot of these core programs. All right, so take NHPP for a second. That's where we can flexibly spend dollars on the national highway system or the NHPP corridors to do a lot of the traditional type of work that we do. That eligibility has expanded to include resilience type projects. Right, so there's additional work that can be done under that program. Or take the CMAQ program, for example. We traditionally work with the Atlanta Regional Commission on delivering those dollars to reduce emissions, things of that nature. There's new eligibility under that program, like standing up a micro-mobility service or e-scooters. Right? You can get into any one of these programs and really dig in and see all of this new eligibility that's been included in the law that previously wasn't there. So it's worth taking that time to step through each one and just see what's there, because an idea that a local government might have or a client might have or the state might have, you may very well find out that it is now an eligible use of federal aid funding to pursue that type of project. Well, let's get into the new programs. Carbon reduction. This is a $6.4 billion program to the state through formula allocation. What that means to Georgia is $40.5 million per year through this program. Very importantly, through this program, 65% is directly suballocated to specific geographic areas. Think your urban areas, right? Like the Metro Atlanta area receives a direct suballocation of this funding to use that money for carbon reduction eligible projects. The purpose, to reduce transportation emissions or develop carbon reduction strategies through the transportation infrastructure. So here are some eligible uses that are specifically listed in the law: traffic monitoring, management control, trail facilities, non-motorized uses, advanced transportation and congestion management technologies. You guys are probably thinking, yes, this is what we do right here. This program is specifically geared towards the type of work that this community does. We at GDOT, we see our V2X roadmap that traffic operations is leading as a primary use for this new funding. There's actually some specific items in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that will allow us to hopefully capture an increased federal share to do that type of project. So just give you a flavor of what this program can be used for. States are required to develop a carbon reduction strategy within 2 years of the signing of the law. So you heard that was November of 21, so the clock is ticking on that, and our planning office is taking the lead. And it requires states in consultation with MPOs to develop the carbon reduction strategy to submit to Federal Highway for approval. Now, getting into the 65% suballocation, this is very important because local governments, MPOs, are going to be receiving this money as direct suballocation to deliver projects. States are required to coordinate in urban areas, and that is a defined term, but essentially you think of that as carrying it through the federal planning process, i.e. inclusion within work programs, and then consult for projects in rural areas. And again, that's a defined term. But what that means from a GDOT perspective is of that 40.5 million, there's about 14.1 million per year left to spend in a more flexible manner anywhere in the state. And there is also a provision that it can be flexed to FDA to fund transit projects as well. So this is a picture of just a trail system in Columbus, Georgia. This could be an eligible use, this type of project for this new program, and things that we're looking to try to implement through the carbon reduction program. Getting into the PROTECT formula program, so you've heard about resiliency and preparing the infrastructure for what's going on with the climate. PROTECT stands for Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. So that is a really good acronym. I like it that they called it PROTECT there. But it's $7.3 billion to states. What that means for Georgia, $46 million per year, apportioned again by formula. So PROTECT's a little bit different. It's got broad eligibility. So if you look to see what can this money be spent on, any highway project eligible for assistance under Title 23, any public transportation service eligible for assistance under Title 49. The law also lists a few specific things, but doesn't dictate the money be spent that way. Connecting ports to other modes, improves efficiency of evacuations, disaster relief, aids transportation, whatever that means. We see, I highlighted the evacuation routes that are in Georgia, coming up from St. Simons and Brunswick here. This could be a very good use for implementing these dollars to try to improve the evacuation operation as it needs to occur when you've got a hurricane coming in. I expect that we're going to get further guidance on this program. Don't know that for sure. Maybe Sabrina has some thoughts on that. But again, right now, very broad eligibility to be utilized under this program. A few key provisions, though. You can't use it any way you want. May not use more than 40% of funding for construction of new capacity. So think about maybe more of your maintenance type activities along those evacuation routes. May not use more than 10% of funding for planning activities. So they want to see boots on the ground infrastructure projects being developed. But you can develop a resilience improvement plan under this program and get an improved match. Reduce match requirement by 7% with a developed plan and a project incorporated into that plan. And then a further 3% additive for a combined 10% reduction in match if it's incorporated into your long-range plan. So, and they want to see planning activities, systemic approach to resiliency, risk-based assessment of vulnerabilities. But that 10% gets you to a 90-10 split. That's a pretty good match for doing this type of project. The new bridge formula program. Our allocation, GDOT's allocation, is $225 million over the life of the bill, or $45 million per year. You see the asterisk there. This is a good news, bad news story for GDOT. The reason we get $45 million a year is because our bridges are in pretty good condition. $45 million is the minimum allocation that BIL gives. Other states that have bridges that are in fair or poor condition, that are in worse shape than Georgia, got more money. So we actually got the minimum allocation there, which again, we see as a positive. That means we've been taking care of our structures and bridges, but obviously we would have loved to have more money to do more work. But we'll be implementing that program, supplementing that into our existing bridge set aside to continue taking care of those assets across the state. There is a provision there, it's important, 100% federal share for locally owned bridges on local roads. There's some specific items in there that you need to pay attention to, because it could be possible to get 100% share, federal share, to replace a locally owned bridge on a local road. A little bit different in this program. This is actually advanced appropriated, which is kind of unique. It was general fund advanced appropriated. So we're not subject to those continued appropriations, looking for that omnibus bill to come through to fund the federal government. These are advanced appropriated through the life of the bill. So this money is there. So we will be delivering this program. Similar is the NEVI program. You heard a lot about this from Mark the other day, so I won't spend too much on this, but switching over to the NEVI program, building out of our alternative fuel corridors. You can see the map on the screen, primarily the interstates. What I don't have here is the new corridors that were recently approved, 441 and US 82, that have added to this map. If you sum all that up, it's about $115 million for the installation and build out of EV charging across the state. We'll see how far that gets us. First and foremost, we've got to fill in the gaps on this map, and we will be doing that. And you heard about the plan development, which is due August 1st, talking about how we're going to approach that. Once you've unlocked these corridors, that's sort of the key to unlock the rest of the state, to build out more strategic areas with industry. You know, Mark talked about the plan development due on August 1st and how Federal Highway has to approve by, is it September 30th, I believe, or October 30th? One of the two, pretty quick turnaround. For October 1st, yeah. We will then be getting into implementation, you know, and that's going to be an opportunity coming out of the department in terms of how do we operationalize these dollars? Because this is a very unique position for a state DOT of building out essentially charging, you know, to power and juice up EVs. We haven't done that in the past. We didn't build out gas stations, but we'll be doing that for EV charging. So it's a unique position for us. We've got to figure out how we're going to do that, following federal guidance and following state law. But obviously, it's an exciting program to be a part of because it's something brand new. You've seen this from Mark, so I won't go through this in detail, but a lot of requirements being built into this plan. Again, ours will be submitted by that August 1st deadline. And then, again, what I want to focus on here is that the implementation plan following the development of the planning document. How are we going to operationalize this? How are we going to leverage industry to deliver EV charging? So that's the conclusion of my remarks. I do want to say one last thing, and I didn't plan on doing this, but I'll do this. $350 million of additional federal aid money is great. What that means is an additional requirement for match. We have to match the federal aid money to utilize it, generally around 20%. When the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law was passed, Georgia did not subsequently pass a revision to how we collect motor fuel. Neither did any other state in the country, right? Our motor fuel collection was set through law, so we didn't see this spike of motor fuel collections, right? And what we have in Georgia is a federal aid program and a state program. So to match the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, you would take money from the state program to the federal aid program, which meant your state program goes down. And that's how we deliver things more quickly, more efficiently. And that was obviously a big concern, you know, that we were going to have to essentially either cancel or shift out projects that we had committed to deliver. So we had to work through that. I have to give a lot of credit to the General Assembly this past session for what they did to support the department. They understood that issue, that additional match meant a reduced state program, and they created a brand new IIJA state money program that fully funds the department to match both 22 and 23. It's called the IIJA program, and it's funded through general fund money, which means it came from another department's budget to fund the department, which is pretty amazing. It's about $160 million to do that. So I just want you guys to recognize that we were in a position where we were gonna have to shift a lot out, and we were able to keep that in to fully fund the federal aid program and keep our state program running. So obviously a great position for the department. So wanted to leave you with that and look forward to questions. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So our next speaker is David Haynes. David Haynes is a senior principal planner within the Transportation Access and Mobility Group of the Atlanta Regional Commission. One of his primary responsibilities is overseeing production of the Atlanta region's long-range transportation plan, a federally required document for all urban areas. Fulfilling this responsibility requires a deep understanding of federal legislation and funding programs, and consequently, he has been heavily involved in establishing the agency's role in implementing the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. He has been with ARC for 21 years and was a transportation planning consultant in the private sector for 9 years prior to that. He earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in civil engineering from Auburn University.
All right, good morning. Thank you. So how do I get to, there we go. All right, thank you. All right, I guess I'm the last speaker of the last panel on a beautiful day. No pressure at all. You're ready to get out to the beach or go golfing or something, but sorry, you have to listen to me for at least a few minutes or pretend to listen. So Sabrina and Andrew did a great job of walking you through some of the details of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, depending on whether you're a part of the administration or you're actually using the official name of the law. Focusing on the Federal Highway Administration side of things for obvious reasons. You know, the audience here, that's primarily where your interests are going to lie, and there's good reason for that. So I'm going to simultaneously sort of take a dive, talking about how my agency has approached our role with supporting our local governments and our other planning partners on implementing, taking advantage of the opportunities. So we are the MPO for the Atlanta region, and as such, you know, we're responsible for doing the long-range transportation plan. So I am firmly rooted in the transportation arena. I mainly deal with federal highway, federal transit funds. That's probably 99% of what we do from a federal funding perspective as the MPO. So, you know, in previous authorizations, you know, we had a standalone transportation bill. The IIJA is very, very different. It's a $1.2 trillion bill. About half of that is for transportation, depending on how you count the numbers. I'll talk about that in a second. The other half is for things like broadband and water and wastewater and climate, clean energy, things like that. So to really understand this federal law, we had to sort of expand our horizons a little bit and really sort of understand the linkages between the transportation pieces and everything else that's in the IIJA. And my director made it very clear that the prime directive of our agency for right now is to help take advantage of the opportunities that this massive infusion of federal cash could have for the Atlanta region. So working with our communications folks, you know, of course, we had to set up a website. You know, that's what you do. Try to share information. So there's a lot of stuff on here that, you know, I will admit on the surface is standard issue stuff. You know, you can go to a lot of places and find a lot of the same materials. Sabrina showed you the federal highway piece of this, where you can get information on the notices of funding opportunity that are available. You can get, you know, the funding breakdowns, you know, all the different things that are out there. So we have some of that same information. If you go to our website, atlantaregional.org/IIJA, this is what you'll see on the landing page. So we've broken everything into 4 main buckets. So Andrew talked about the 4 buckets, how GDOT looks at it from a transportation perspective. Transportation is lumped into 1 bucket for us. And then we have climate, energy, and the environment, broadband, cybersecurity, and then other miscellaneous stuff. So if you click on any of those 4 there, you will see. How do I scroll down? Sorry. Oh, there we go. 2 fingers. Tricky. I probably should have done a test drive on this before. But you can click on any of those 4 blocks and get some general information about those 4 main buckets of funding. And then you scroll further down. You know, we do have a news feed as the NOFOs are released. We do provide that. We also have a way that you can sign up to receive email updates. We have not yet started sending out those emails because we want to make sure that we're not just producing more white noise. We know that there are lots and lots and lots of ways that you can get information in your inbox, and we don't want to create more clutter. We wanted to really figure out how do we add value to what you can get from other sources. We did do a webinar a few weeks ago, back in June, about the IIJA. There you see I keep wanting to do that. I'm used to my Surface where I can have the touch screen. You can view a recording of that webinar, and we do have a Connect ATL Summit coming up. I was told to plug this. Please plan to attend on August 23rd at the Georgia Tech Hotel and Conference Center in downtown Midtown Atlanta. We'll have an IIJA resource room there as part of that summit. So this is all well and good, but it is pretty basic information, nothing particularly unique about what I've shown you so far. But I do want to show you what I think is perhaps a little more interesting. So we were instructed that we were to be the region's resource for understanding what's in the IIJA and how to tap into the funding, but not just for transportation. We had to provide that information for the entire bill. So where this kind of came from is when the bill was passed back in November, you know, of course, we all started reading everybody's summaries from, Transportation Weekly to Transportation for America, all the different think tanks and professional organizations. They had their, articles about, what's in there for transportation. And every article I read had a different number. 450 billion, 550 billion, some were even up to like 650 billion. I was like, it can't be that hard to add up the numbers. What's going on here? So what I did is I downloaded the build.gov, that 465-page sort of fact sheet summary of the law, and there's an Excel spreadsheet version of that because I really wanted to get in and sort of understand how is everybody looking at the same law and coming up with different numbers. And what I was able to figure out was it all depends on what your definition of transportation is. On the surface, you'll think, well, let me just go in and add up all the US DOT programs. Simple, right? Well, the thing is, there's also transportation money available under other departments. For example, EPA has money to fund the purchase of clean school buses. Arguably, that's transportation. Even the Department of Energy has some money that's available you could build bike lanes and sidewalks through the Department of Energy. So there's 100 million here, there's 500 million there. There's this kind of stuff sprinkled all throughout the law that could be counted as transportation. So whether or not you captured that, depending on, that affected how your number came out. The other kind of variable in this, we've talked about the Highway Trust Fund, the advanced appropriations, the so-called real money. There's also provisions, there are several programs in here that have been authorized, but they're subject to the annual appropriations process of Congress. So it's potential tentative money, but it's not real money that will go into a bank account. So whether or not you count that authorized money or not can also affect your total. So that's why you were seeing this big range. And that's what I figured out looking at that database. So when we were trying to figure out how can we really add value and provide some unique information, we use that research kind of as a starting point. And what you see here is kind of the end product. And I'll spend maybe 3 minutes real quickly going through this. And hopefully you can actually see what I'm doing, but I'll try to describe it as best I can. But you know, the bill has over 400 programs. We know right off the bat that not every single one of those programs is going to be relevant to the Atlanta region. There's money in there for tribal programs out west, or mine reclamation activities, or marine estuary restorations, things like that. So the very first thing that we did is we went through and kind of took, and I clicked on all opportunities, and you see 409 results, stripped that down, identified the ones that we think are relevant to the Atlanta region. We're down to 239. Then we sort of created some various filters. And let's say specifically that you're looking at transportation. We're now down to 112. And the funding type, Sabrina talked about the directed funded, and Andrew also talked about the formula funding. That, for the most part, is not going to be accessible to local governments. It's the competitive programs that will probably generate the most interest. That's where you submit to DC, you're competing on a nationwide basis to tap into some of these programs. So if you look specifically at competitive programs, we're now down to 70 results. And then depending on what type of agency you are, some may be eligible for programs and others. So let's say, for example, that you're a city. So you want to know what competitive programs am I as a city eligible to apply for under transportation. We've now cut 409 programs down to 43. So this is a way for us to help our planning partners really sort of focus on what makes sense, cut away all of the noise and distractions of the bill. So very quickly, what you see in these 43 results, and I will scroll down, and I'll just use the Bridge Investment Program as an example. So under each of those, you have a couple of places where you can click links to get more information, and I won't do that for the sake of time, but under the program name, what we try to do is find the official US government website about the program. You know, you go into Google, you can query Bridge Investment Program, you'll get thousands and thousands of hits, but trying to find the actual official information might be a little bit of a challenge. So we've taken care of that. This should take you to the official information. So we've got fields here that show you the description, how much funding is available, and this is where you get into some of those nuances. So here, for example, $15.5 billion of funding available, but really only $12.5 billion of that is actually advance appropriated or real money from the trust fund. There's another $3.3 billion that was authorized, but is subject to that annual appropriations process. And then depending on where the status of that program is, if it's pending, I'll just show you up here. That says to be determined. Here, based on the variety of websites that we're sort of scouring and monitoring, our best guess for when this program will, NOFO will be available is fourth quarter of this year. But there are some, like the Bridge Investment Programs, that are open now. So we provided the link that takes you directly to that NOFO website. Again, having to eliminate that Google search and running into lots of dead ends and frustrations, it'll take you right where you need to be. And you can also, one last quick little feature, you turn off all these various filters, and let's say that you as a staff member happen to hear about, you know, the railroad crossing elimination program through a meeting, and you were told, you know, go back and find out, find out what that is. You can query based on, a keyword. It'll take you right to that program, right to that NOFO. And one last little feature, you can also sort based on this apply column. In fact, you can sort based on any of these, but the apply column is really the most useful. So if you're just interested in, everything that's out there, you can see all of those open NOFOs in a single place. And that's regardless of transportation, broadband, clean energy, whatever, they all filter to the top. So I know that was pretty quick, a lot of information. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about, how to use this or how we developed it, but I will turn it back over and we'll open up the Q&A, I guess. Thank you.
Thanks, David. If anybody has any questions, feel free to step up to the mic.
I guess this question is for all three of you. A lot of information. And is there a plan for a formalized outreach program to support the locals and about the funding, or these various tools that you all have developed is really the end game?
Navigator is that is it one time when that say for trying to apply for how to fill out so going to Dran-Scott-Dove, getting that information and making sure you have everything in place. Like soon as that NOFO comes out, that agency can start figuring out what they need to do. There's additional resources is coming out within the programs itself. So for example, within like Reconnected Communities, there's going to be, and there's only so much time to go through it, but there's something called Thriving Communities. And that's a relationship with not only DOT has, but with HUD. And so there's going to be technical resources and within there. So I know it seems like it was very overwhelming with all these NOFOs, and some of them are very long, 90 pages, 50 pages. Just trying to read through that and then going to that site. And there's also points of contact. I would also encourage you to reach out to those points of contact for questions and webinars. I think you had talked about the webinar y'all had on the Federal Highway site and the bill site. So if you can't attend one of the meetings, like on Safe Roads Safe Roads program, there's those webinars. You can go back and see, and watch it again and go through it. Because US DOT and Federal Highway, we are putting a lot of effort and resources to providing assistance on the front end. And of course, then great, you get now what? You get the grant, then there's also resources there as well. And so more to come, but I also encourage you to subscribe. But I think all three, as David, they have a lot of resources as well. And so collectively, we're all here to help.
Yeah, and we've been directed to do everything that we possibly can as an agency to provide whatever assistance our partners need. But we do have to recognize that we have a certain amount of staff bandwidth. We do have other responsibilities. So trying to figure out, number one, where are those opportunities, like Sabrina just mentioned, where we can point people. It's like, there's already something to help you with that particular issue. We at ARC don't need to replicate that. And in a worst case scenario, we don't need to be doing anything that's contradictory or undermining what somebody else is doing, and probably doing a better, more comprehensive job than we could ever do, as a smaller agency. So we see we're still trying to figure out exactly what our support role will be. We've already had some smaller local governments who don't have grant writers on staff ask us if we can help them write grants. We're trying to figure out how to respond to that and figure out how do we equitably support all of our local governments. So that's still kind of to be determined. But one thing that I would point out, I showed you right there at the end how you could look at what NOFOs may be coming up, like in the fourth quarter of 2022. We think that we can do a good job of kind of running interference with understanding what's coming down the pike with these opportunities, because I think that there is a predisposition whenever there's federal money out there that there is a lot of pressure. Well, we have to apply for that. We can't let this opportunity go by because, who knows if we'll ever get another chance. Well, I think this bill is big enough where you will get another chance. So if we can demonstrate that, yes, there is funding out there right now, but maybe what your issue is, what your need is, or the project you're considering, that might be a square peg, round hole kind of situation. But look, here's something else that's coming up maybe 3 months from now, 6 months from now, or maybe, there'll be another round of funding, this time next year. Maybe strategically you hold off, and rather than wasting your time and energy and money going after a grant where you really don't have a great shot at, you invest that in this other upcoming opportunity. And that's where I think we can add a lot of value, is helping people figure out when and where to take advantage of these opportunities. You don't necessarily have to go for everything that's out there. And that's kind of a hard thing to get across sometimes. Confronted at a meeting and say, well, why didn't we get a slice of this pie? Why didn't we apply for anything? So that's one avenue that we're looking at on how we can support.
We've been asked similar questions like, will we programmatically write grant applications to support local governments? We're not going to be in a position to be able to do that just from a bandwidth and resource perspective. But obviously, staff is available for specific questions, specific projects. Let's have those conversations and talk through how we approach this in a partnership perspective. I do also want to mention that, it's one thing to write a grant. Once you win the grant, you've got to deliver that project, which is sometimes easier said than done. I strongly encourage, if you're working with local governments that are not LAP certified, to go through that training, go through that certification process to understand the nuances and challenges of delivering a federal aid project. Don't forget about that piece, the delivery piece. But again, our staff and our folks are available to help you guide through that as well. But right now, I don't anticipate a unique or a specialized outreach process for the BIL at this point.
Got me thinking. So I kind of touched on a little bit, but with fiscal year 22 funding, there is a lot of money for planning. And so if a local agency is not quite sure yet, and maybe they instead of jumping right in, you got to have that plan done. And so I know for safety, there's money, for that, and reconnecting communities. And so, typically there would be, but now there's ways to build a lot more for smaller amount, get that plan done, then next year or two afterwards, same thing. Oh, okay. And then apply for implementation funds. So so that is also an easier way, smaller grant to get started. But I just want to put that plug in there because that's another opportunity. And, in federal highway, we work through, again, through the state and local agencies, so federal regulations. And so we are all figuring it out together, and we're working on it.
Thanks everyone for coming on Wednesday morning. A few wrap-up items. I just wanted to talk about the conference next year, July 16th through 19th. So go ahead and get that in your calendar. If you guys are interested in helping in the conference at any capacity, just reach out to me. I think most of you guys have my email, but if you don't, I can give it to you. Just find me after this. I know, and for the technical session this year, I had a lot of people reach out later, I would say, in the planning process with some ideas. So the earlier you guys reach out, the better. We usually start planning in like January, February timeframe. And we traditionally we don't solicit abstracts for the technical program. We just have the technical committee meet and we discuss things that we think would be great for the presentation. So if you guys want to present or have any ideas of what you'd like to present or hear about, earlier the better. And I think that is everything I have. Thanks to Christy for everything this year. Big shoes to fill. And I will see most of you guys back in Atlanta. Thanks.